whole team could have looked up to you, said, Dada is still there.
Every time, whether I scored 100 or a Sachin scored 100 or a Rahul scored 100, the scoreboard said India won.
Let the kids know and the families know that one of the best ways to get a good education, go to a good school and a good college anywhere in the world is if you play a sport well.
There is a quality about me which is why perhaps people feel I'm a perfectionist, because I don't get tired easily.
In Germany, the biggest newspaper was written on the first page, "This is a finishing from Lothar Matthäus' career," and this was motivating me.
I was literally on my phone at home and they're like, "Oh, we have the results. We suggest that you remove your breasts." And I'm like, wait, what?
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9. English news as it should be.
A very good morning. You're watching News 9. Thank you so much for tuning in this Wednesday morning. I'm Karthik Malhotra. Well, the big story we are bringing for you this morning, 3 personalities and 3 different outcomes. Ali Larijani has been confirmed killed. That's the statement which has come from Iran. Its head of security, Ali Larijani, is now confirmed dead. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu releases fresh videos saying that he continues to be very much alive. And Joe Kent, the head of the counterterrorism in the US, quits over differences with Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the LPG crisis in India begins to simmer after reaching boiling point as shipments from the Gulf carrying energy supplies arrive on Indian ports. And also on the show, we'll bring you a perspective from Gaurang Shah. Is the IPO story in India fading given the market volatility? That and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. First up, a quick look at all the headlines we're tracking for you this Wednesday morning. US President Donald Trump said the United States will exit its military operation in Iran in the very near future, even as the conflict enters its 3rd week. Donald Trump slams NATO for refusing to join Iran operation, calls it a very foolish mistake. In a major blow to Iran's already shaken leadership, Israel has eliminated Iran's security chief Ali Larijani, one of the most powerful figures in Tehran wartime decision-making structure. The US targets Iranian missile positions near the Strait of Hormuz as Iran fires missiles across the region and vows revenge for the killing of senior figure Ali Larijani. The head of the US National Counterterrorism Center, Joseph Kent, has resigned in protest over the ongoing war with Iran, becoming the first senior official in Donald Trump's administration to step down over the conflict. The US Federal Reserve is expected to keep interest rates unchanged this week as the Iran war disrupts oil markets and supply chains, while economic data begins to weaken. Air India and Air India Express to operate 50 flights to and from West Asia today, despite disruptions from ongoing US-Israel-Iran conflict. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel vows unbreakable resistance after US President Donald Trump suggests Washington could take control of the island nation. And NVIDIA says it is restarting production of a China-compliant AI chip, with CEO Jensen Huang signaling a strategic pivot after earlier halts due to tightening US export restrictions. We We continue to bring you the coverage of the war in West Asia. Amid the ongoing tensions in West Asia, US President Donald Trump said the United States will exit its military operation in Iran in what he calls the very near future, even as the conflict enters its third week. Now, speaking at an Oval Office event, Trump said Washington was not ready to withdraw just yet, but suggested the mission could conclude soon. Now, remember, the US is currently engaged in a joint military campaign with Israel against Iran that has heightened tensions across West Asia and disrupted key global energy routes.
Iran is just a military operation to me. Iran is something that was essentially largely over in 2 or 3 days because the Navy was wiped out almost immediately. The Air Force came next. The anti-aircraft came next. I mean, we're flying over Iran. We could take out their electric capacity in 1 hour. We have all there's nothing they can do right now because everything is knocked out, but we're not ready to leave yet. But we'll be leaving in the near future. We'll be leaving in pretty much the very near future. But right now they've been decimated from every standpoint. And again, we've had great support from countries in the Middle East, great support, but we've had no support from essentially no support from NATO.
And even as Trump suggested that the war could end very soon, the US president struck a more aggressive tone, saying American military operations against Iran were proceeding very, very strongly and claiming the strikes had inflicted heavy damage on the country's military as well as nuclear capabilities. Now, Trump alleged that Iran had been close to developing a nuclear weapon and argued that the ongoing campaign was necessary to stop that from happening. According to him, the scale of the damage caused by the attacks could set Iran's nuclear capabilities back for years, possibly even up to a decade. Listen in to the US president again.
I just do want to say that the war is proceeding very, very strongly. We're doing very, very well. Iran, knocking the hell out of them, and you have to do that. We can't let them have a nuclear weapon. They were 2 weeks away, in my opinion, 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. If those beautiful, magnificent machines, those B-2 bombers, if they didn't do their job 7 or 8 months ago, they would have had a nuclear weapon, and there would have been no talking to them. We have to put out this cancer. It's a cancer. We had to take that operation. And we did, and it was very successful. And it continues. Frankly, as somebody said, they could leave today, and it would take 10 years to rebuild the damage that's been done. But I think we have to make it a little bit more permanent because no other president has to go through this, and we shouldn't have any other president having to go through this kind of a thing. And if they didn't want to do it, if for some reason they didn't want to do it, we'd have the same problem. We don't ever want to have that problem again, not with lunatics. We can't have lunatics controlling nuclear weaponry.
And in another equally strong message, US President Donald Trump has sharply criticized NATO, calling its refusal to join the ongoing military operation against Iran a very foolish mistake. Trump said most NATO allies had been informed about the campaign, but ultimately chose not to participate militarily, even though they broadly support the joint US-Israel action. Now, posting on social media, Trump claimed allied nations agree that Iran must not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons, yet many are unwilling to commit forces to the battlefield. The US president went further, describing NATO as a one-way street, arguing that the United States spends heavily on security while receiving insufficient support from its partners in return.
Well, we don't need too much help, and we don't need any help, actually. In fact, we just put out a notice. I was watching over the last couple of weeks, and all of our NATO allies were very much in favor of what we did. They thought it was very important. We were just discussing it, actually. Very important that we take out the nuclear threat from Iran, and we've done that very strongly, very powerfully. We've wiped out their Navy, wiped out their military in every aspect. But I was surprised to see that NATO, while they agree that it was a very important thing to do, they agree fully. Nobody said, oh, you shouldn't do it. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month of when we had the B-2 bombers bomb the nuclear potential. I call it the nuclear dust. I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. And I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there.
Meanwhile, reiterating his stand, French President Emmanuel Macron said France will not take part in any military operation to unblock the Strait of Hormuz, pushing back against remarks by Donald Trump that Paris was willing to help. Macron, in fact, stressed that France is not a party to the ongoing conflict and therefore will not participate in efforts to reopen the strategic waterway while fighting continues. However, Macron said France could support a maritime escort system once the situation stabilizes and major bombing operations stop.
Nous ne sommes pas partie prenante au conflit. Et donc, jamais la France ne prendra part à des opérations.
We are not party to the conflict, and therefore, France will never take part in operations to open or liberate the Strait of Hormuz in the current context. On the other hand, we are convinced that once the situation has calmed down, and I deliberately use this term broadly, once the situation has calmed down, that is to say, once the main bombing has ceased, we are ready, along with other nations, to assume responsibility for the escort system. But it is all political, technical, and obviously with all the actors of maritime transport, with the insurers and operational work that we must build. We have begun exchanges with India, with several other European partners or partners in the region.
Nous avons commencé les échanges avec l'Inde, avec plusieurs autres partenaires européens ou partenaires de la région.
Well, the head of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center, Joseph Kent, has resigned in protest over the ongoing war with Iran, becoming the first senior official in Donald Trump's administration to step down over the conflict. Now, Kent announced his resignation on Tuesday, saying he opposed the joint U.S.-Israel military campaign against Iran. In a resignation letter addressed to Donald Trump and later posted on social media platform X, Kent said he could not support the war, arguing that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States. Take a look.
The head of the U.S. National Counterterrorism Center resigned on Tuesday, saying he opposed the war in Iran. Joseph Kent is the first senior official in President Donald Trump's administration to quit over the joint U.S.-Israeli military campaign. In a resignation letter addressed to Trump and posted on X, Kent wrote, quote, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby."
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Donald Trump was asked about the resignation in the Oval Office.
He seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out.
Trump and his top aides have cited a number of different and sometimes conflicting reasons for their attack on Iran and its ultimate objectives. The chairman of the House Democratic Congress said that Kent's resignation highlighted Trump's broken promises to the American people.
They believed him when he said he didn't want to make investments in foreign wars or to get America in more conflicts. They believed him. This is someone who just can't be believed.
Now, thanks to the decisive leadership of President Trump,
Kent has long been known for his America First beliefs and has said he opposes U.S. military interventions abroad. Still, one U.S. official said his resignation came as a surprise. Kent is close with Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who has kept a low profile since the Iran war began. Gabbard's office, which oversees the Counterterrorism Center, did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
U.S. President Donald Trump has in fact welcomed the resignation of his top U.S. counterterrorism official Joe Kent over the war with Iran. Trump said it was a good thing that Joe Kent stepped down as director of the National Counterterrorism Center, criticizing him as a very weak on security. Now, speaking to reporters, the U.S. president said that officials who do not support the strikes on Iran are not aligned with U.S. national security priorities. The U.S. president also shared a 6-year-old social media post by Kent where the former U.S. counterterrorism chief was seen advocating an attack on Iran, requesting Trump to not sit and wait for the next attack.
The Director of National Counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon.
And in a major blow to Iran's already shaken leadership, Israel has eliminated Iran's security chief, Ali Larijani, one of the most powerful figures in Tehran's wartime decision-making structure. Iranian social media, state media, in fact, confirmed the killing, adding that Larijani's son and a close aide were also killed in the strike. But this is not just another high-profile assassination. Larijani was deeply embedded in Iran's decision-making system and had long been a key figure within the country's political and security establishment. He is also known to be a close aide to former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Now, following Khamenei's death, Larijani had effectively emerged as one of the most influential figures shaping Iran's wartime strategy during the ongoing conflict. His elimination removes not only a key strategist from Tehran's leadership, but also one of the last influential figures within the system who was seen as capable of engaging with Western powers. Let's listen in to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
הבוקר חיסלנו את עלי לריג'ני. עלי לריג'ני זה הבוס של משמרות המהפכה, שזה חבורת הגנגסטרים שמנהלת בפועל את איראן. אנחנו חיסלנו לצידו גם את מפקד הבסיס, זה העוזרים של הגנגסטרים, שהם מפיצים טרור ברחובות טהרן וערים אחרות של איראן נגד האוכלוסייה. גם שם אנחנו פועלים מהאוויר עם מטוסים של חיל האוויר, עם כטב"מים, וגם שם פועלים. אנחנו מערערים את המשטר הזה בתקווה לתת לעם האיראני הזדמנות לסלק אותו. אנחנו עוזרים לידידינו האמריקנים במפרץ. אני שוחחתי ארוכות עם הנשיא טראמפ אתמול בנושא הזה. יש שיתוף פעולה בין חילות האוויר וחילות הים שלנו, ביני לבין הנשיא טראמפ ואנשיו. אנחנו נעזור גם בהתקפות עקיפות שמייצרות לחץ אדיר על המשטר האיראני, וגם בפעולות ישירות. יש עוד הרבה הפתעות, בתחבולות נעשה מלחמה, אנחנו לא נחשוף את כל התחבולות כאן, אבל אמרתי לכם, רבות המה. אנחנו בעזרת השם הגענו למצב שאחרי ה7 באוקטובר שהיינו בעברי פי פחת, אנחנו עכשיו מעצמה אדירה, כמעט עולמית, עם הידידה שהיא המעצמה העולמית, נלחמים שכם אל שכם. זה כבר הישג אדיר מול כל האיומים שיבואו עלינו.
And there's a bigger crisis waiting to unfold as an aftermath of the war in West Asia. The United States has warned that the ongoing conflict in West Asia could push millions more people into hunger worldwide. Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq said a new estimate by the World Food Programme shows that nearly 45 million additional people could face acute food insecurity in 2026 if the Iran war continues and oil prices remain above the level of $100 a barrel.
And the World Food Programme is warning today that the total number of people around the world facing acute levels of hunger could reach record numbers in 2026 if the escalation in the Middle East continues to destabilize the world's economy. New analysis by WFP estimates that almost 45 million more people could fall into acute food insecurity or worse if the conflict does not end by the middle of the year and if oil prices remain above $100 a barrel. These would add to the 318 million people around the world who are already food insecure. Ultimately, the basic point is that if the fighting ends, then the Strait of Hormuz will be operational. What's important now is that all steps be taken to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz can be functional, because, as I just pointed out, one of the consequences of it not being open will be a drastic increase in world hunger.
And back home, Air India and Air India Express will operate a total of 50 flights to and from West Asia today, even as tensions in the region continue to disrupt global aviation routes. According to a statement issued by Air India, the operations will include 26 scheduled flights and 24 non-scheduled services on March 18th. The airline said both carriers will jointly maintain connectivity with key destinations across the region despite the challenging conditions. As flight operations across West Asia have been affected by the ongoing conflict, airlines have been forced to adjust routes and schedules to ensure passenger safety. And some relief on way for the LPG crisis, which was brewing in India all of last week and earlier this week, with another Indian-flagged LPG tanker, which has safely reached India after sailing through the conflict-hit Strait of Hormuz, even as authorities continue efforts to secure the passage of other vessels still in the region. The tanker Nanda Devi arrived at Kandla port in Gujarat on Tuesday. A day earlier, another LPG carrier, Shivalik, had reached Mundra port. Together, the two ships are carrying nearly 92,700 tons of LPG, roughly equivalent to India's one-day cooking gas requirement. Officials said the cargo discharge process has begun, with Nanda Devi currently undertaking a ship-to-ship transfer operation. Authorities also confirmed that all Indian seafarers operating in the Persian Gulf region remain safe and no incidents involving Indian vessels were reported in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, officials say a massive amount of LPG cargo still remains stranded near the Strait of Hormuz due to the ongoing conflict in West Asia. According to Shipping Ministry Special Secretary Rajesh Kumar Sinha, nearly 3 lakh metric tons of LPG are currently stuck in the region. In total, 22 Indian-flagged vessels remain near the Strait of Hormuz, including LPG carriers, crude oil tankers, container ships and bulk carriers.
रफली मेरे पास जो फिगर है कि एक एलपीजी कैरियर में अबाउट 45,000 मेट्रिक टन्स एलपीजी कैरी करता है वो, तो लगभग 3 लाख मेट्रिक टन एलपीजी होना चाहिए। और एलएनजी और क्रूड का मेरे पास फिगर नहीं है, मैं आपको कल दे दूंगा।
Meanwhile, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said India is ramping up domestic LPG production to ensure cooking gas supplies remain steady even as imports face disruption due to tensions across West Asia. Now, speaking in the Rajya Sabha, the Finance Minister said nearly 65% of India's LPG demand is met through imports, with about 90% of those shipments typically passing through the Strait of Hormuz.
Even in energy, gas LPG sector, we have been building up capacities, and even at this time, the way in which we have ramped up domestic capacity in LPG is also coming of help now. On 8th March 2026, just 2 weeks ago, the government directed refineries and petrochemical complexes to maximize LPG production by diverting propane, butane and propylene and butane's streams to the LPG pool. As a result, domestically also, we are ramping up capacities to supply LPG, and domestic LPG production going up about 25% approximately. The entire output of this ramped up capacity is going for domestic consumers.
And with that, let's slip into a very short break. When we come back, Gaurang Shah will be here to tell us the mood of the market this morning, as Sensex is trading in the range of about 76,400 points, more than 400 points up from yesterday's trade. And also, is the market volatility fading the IPO buzz for 2026? That and more on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
जीत के जश्न में जब भारत झूमा, मैंने उस जश्न का स्वाद बढ़ाया। देश की बेटियों ने जब हौसला दिखाया, इस लाल रंग ने उस पल को हर चेहरे पे सजाया। 100 सालों से ज्यादा का सफर रूह अफ़ज़ा के हर घूंट में समाया है, तभी तो पूरे इंडिया ने इसे दिल में बसाया है। रूह अफ़ज़ा, ड्रिंक ऑफ इंडिया।
This season, we're going to explore the unknown sides and destinations of Spain.
Welcome back. You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. Time now to take a quick check at the stock markets, which opened just a few minutes ago. In fact, let's begin with Asia, which opens ahead of India, and it seems like a good mood in store for investors looking at Asian markets. In fact, Japan's Nikkei 225, taking very strong cues from the US market, is up about 2.3% or so in trade this morning. So that's the big sort of development coming from Asia. But it's not just Japan's Nikkei 225. Even South Korea's Kospi is up almost 4% or so in trade this morning. The last trading price seen at about 5,858. Taiwan's TAIEX also up about 1.5%. In fact, a little more than 1.5% this morning. Meanwhile, the Shanghai Composite Index is down in trade this morning, and a similar sentiment also seen, a flattish gap down, one could call, in Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index. So that's the mood coming in from Asian markets, taking very strong cues mostly across the tech-heavy Nikkei, Kospi, as well as TAIEX, which are registering massive gains in trade this morning. Meanwhile, remember, the US markets have also ended higher. Let's take a look at the Indian stock markets as well. Let's begin with the heat map, and the heat map is telling us that it is a bounce back in the IT stocks that we are. In fact, pairing all the losses that we saw yesterday across TCS, Infosys, Wipro and Tech Mahindra. All these companies now registering healthy gains. In fact, all other sectors also pretty much positive, barring mixed views, mixed signals coming from the banking and financial services, with HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank, the two heavyweights, in red this morning. Gains seen also in Bharti Airtel. That stock is up about 1% or so in trade. In fact, let's pull up the IT stocks and take a look at how they're faring this morning. The numbers on your screen seem fairly promising, with TCS and Infosys both registering massive comebacks in rally this morning. In fact, TCS stock is up about 3% or so in trade, while Infosys is up about 1.7%. Similar news coming in from HCL Tech, up more than 2%. Wipro also up more than 2%. Tech Mahindra also up about 1.5%. So it's a sea of green as far as the IT stocks are concerned. If you pull up the mood check on the Indian stock markets, you'll see that Sensex and Nifty are both trading in green this morning. We will bring up those charts for you, but Gaurang Shah, for your time once again. Just want to understand from you this bounce back that we are seeing in IT stocks. Is this just value buying, or do you think there is some sort of a pivot when it comes to India's IT story?
Thank you, Karthik, for having me on the show. Good morning to you and to all your viewers. A small disclosure, all recommendations that I'll be sharing with you this morning on your show, Karthik, are a part of our fundamental recommendations from a long-term point of view. Our company, Jyojit, or myself, we do not have any kind of personal investments, no financial interest, no conflict of interest, but we share advice with our clients on similar lines. They might have their investment interest. So I think, first of all, the valuation-wise attractiveness is definitely there in the IT space, given the correction post the Anthropic AI tool. And then, of course, flight to safety sectors because of rising crude oil prices. IT is one of the service sector which is relatively less affected and does not have any kind of close connectivity with rising crude oil prices. Maybe it is some kind of value buying, or maybe it is flight to safety kind of a trade that is taking place. But on the fundamental side, Karthik, we remain positive on IT with 1.5 to 2 year kind of perspective. Small cap, mid cap and large cap. Across, we have recommendations.
So those are the recommendations. The IT mid cap and small cap seem to be the recommendations coming in. We will pull up those charts also. Meanwhile, Throw some numbers for the sake of better clarity for our viewers, because we were up until now, Mr. Shah, looking at at indices and the kind of wealth erosion from the time the war started on the 28th of February. But I've just taken the liberty to go back this entire calendar year, and starting 1st Jan, Nifty 50 is down about almost 10% or so. Let's pull up those graphics on the screen for the sake of our viewers to get more clarity. Nifty 50 is down about 10% or so in trade this calendar year 2026. We've also seen Nifty oil and gas perform better despite the tension in West Asia, down just about 9%. I'm saying just with a lot of caution, because Nifty auto is down about 12% or so. Nifty bank is down about 8%. But Nifty IT, and even though we are seeing a bounce back in IT stocks perhaps on value buying this morning, Nifty IT has eroded almost a quarter of investor wealth in this calendar year alone. Meanwhile, the small cap and the mid cap section also to be battered. The Nifty small cap 250 is down almost 11%. The Nifty mid cap is down more than 9%. Overall, this entire calendar year has pretty much been a bloodbath for investors, but the war is just a little over 2 weeks old. So overall, I'm saying if the war were to continue for a little while longer, or even if they were to come to an end, the fighting was to sort of come to an end sometime soon, as US President Donald Trump is claiming, the overall investor sentiment seems to be fairly negative this entire year, Mr. Shah.
Last year also was quite bad, Karthik. We had a higher single-digit return entire calendar year 2025. And I think it was since the beginning of the tariff-related fears and the constant shifting of goal by the US president. Not only last year, but even on this geopolitical situation, if you actually go to see, there's been a constant shifting of goal by the US president. Started with regime change, and then it has completely gone haywire. Overall correction, the market is close to about 12%. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sector specific, some are less, some are more. And my sense, Karthik, is that, given the situation that we are into and the close dependency of India's on imports of energy requirement, crude oil and natural gas, and this has a direct impact on the GDP also, as we all know, Karthik. So, this could stay on for some time, till the time we have some kind of resolution, de-escalation, diplomatic talk getting initiated in the Middle East. And this time it is a little bit different, Karthik, because of Iran and Strait of Hormuz. And that's our dependency, right? That's our large portion of our lifeline for our energy requirement. So in that kind of a scenario, you will have markets underperforming, but looking beyond next 3 to 6 months, I think these are great times to get invested in strong names from a long-term point.
All right, so strong names from a long-term point of view. Meanwhile, you were talking about the rising crude prices, and there we had them on the screen. In fact, Brent crude is up year to date about 70% or so. So this is obviously something which will have lasting effects on the secondary as well as the third grade of impact. So this is something that obviously is going to be a story which is unlikely to fade off anytime soon. But Mr. Shah, I also want to understand, what does this sort of volatile environment really mean for IPOs which were scheduled to hit the Indian capital markets this year? PhonePe, of course, has said that it has deferred its $1.3 billion IPO. Meanwhile, Zepto is still apparently targeting that $7 to $8 billion valuation. Oyo is also targeting a similar valuation. Flipkart has pretty much flipped back to India to unlock a massive $35 to $40 billion valuation. Razorpay has initiated discussions. So all these NSE. So all these were IPOs, big ticket, sort of top headline grabbing IPOs which were scheduled to hit India this year. But given all the volatility that we are seeing in the market and some early statements coming in, how do you see the IPO market shaping up this year?
I think relatively it would be deferred.
Okay.
And my sense, and again, we all heard Karthik, Honorable Chair of SEBI, cautioning investors with the kind of approach that investors were going into the IPO. And last year and the year before, some of the IPOs which are right now, if you actually look at them, they're trading below the IPO price, most of them. So my word of caution to all your viewers, that if you're looking at investment in IPO, there are a lot of ways to figure out whether the paper is credible or not and whether the valuation are reasonable or not. Don't approach all IPOs with the same mentality and perspective listing gains. You may end up falling flat. So, and my sense, Karthik, for this year, to answer your question, is that good paper, decent valuation, and attractiveness in terms of future earnings will definitely get subscribed.
Okay.
Some names which are rich valuation and not so very certain future outlook will tend to fail or pop out.
All right. And what about retail investors, Mr. Shah, who have their capital stuck in markets which are underperforming? Will they be in a position to exit their position, some cash, and wait for an IPO to park their money in?
So I think, well, honestly, Karthik, I will be a little bit more satisfied if the space or the run rate of IPO slows down a little bit in this kind of a market.
Okay.
Because this is going to put pressure on the primary market.
Right.
And then you will have a lot of noise around it. So I'm glad that the run rate is slowing down, the space is slowing down on the IPO, and good papers will get merit. Not so good papers or a rich valuation will not get that kind of merit or subscription. Whether there will be liquidation from the secondary market to go into primary market, history tells me that it used to be a case many years back. But of the recent years that I've seen, there is enough liquidity in the system, and I don't think there's going to be any kind of pressure on the secondary market if there is a primary market quality paper coming in. There is enough liquidity, Karthik.
Liquidity. All right. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for. But as always, pleasure having you with us, Mr. Shah. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us here on News 9. And with that, we will slip into a very short break. A lot more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया
It's confirmed. About Khamenei. It was also about the entire regime which the Americans wanted to take out.
Are the Iranians going to carry out their pledges and are they going to continue with their attack?
Though Trump had said that the waves of attack would continue, but a new signal has come that there might be a small pause.
IRGC is likely to adopt lesser radical and more pragmatic approach to basically buy time so that the regime can survive.
There is much more than what is visible or to the naked eye.
Khamenei was killed because uranium enrichment and the Iranian desire to make a bomb.
That expertise is there. People know how to enrich it. There are infrastructure which can again be rebuilt.
Iran today is headless. There is transition, but conclusion is far away.
You're watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. US President Donald Trump has postponed his planned visit to China as the Iran war continues to reshape US foreign policy. The visit, originally planned for late March, is now expected to be pushed back by several weeks as Washington focuses on the military and economic fallout of the war in West Asia. The Trump-Xi Jinping summit was aimed at easing tensions between the world's two largest economies and addressing key issues including trade, tariffs and technology. But rising oil prices, threats to shipping through the Strait of Hormuz and broader geopolitical tensions have shifted the administration's focus away from diplomacy with Beijing.
We're resetting the meeting, and it looks like it'll take place in about 5 weeks.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday said he was postponing a highly anticipated trip to Beijing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The decision comes as the war with Iran upends U.S. foreign policy and delays an effort to ease tensions between the world's two biggest economies.
We're working with China. They were fine with it. We're going to say, I look forward to seeing President Xi. He looks forward to seeing me, I think. But I do look forward to seeing him. We have a good relationship with China. China actually has become economically for us very good, as you know. It's much different than it was in the past.
China's embassy in Washington did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The postponed visit heightens uncertainty for markets and diplomacy alike, as the war with Iran has driven oil prices higher, threatened shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, and sharpened investor focus on energy security. The delay will also sideline talks to ease trade frictions between Washington and Beijing over Taiwan, tariffs, computer chips, illegal drugs, rare earths, and agriculture.
Because of the war, I want to be here. I have to be here, I feel.
Trump's campaign in Iran has unleashed a wave of military and economic consequences and commanded attention from across his administration.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to hold interest rates steady as the Iran war adds fresh uncertainty to the global economy. Policymakers are widely expected to leave rates unchanged at the end of their two-day meeting on Wednesday. Now, this decision comes as the war involving the United States, Israel and Iran sends shockwaves through oil markets and global supply chains. The US Fed will also release its latest economic projections, with investors closely watching for any downgrades to growth forecasts or changes in inflation outlook. The central bank had cut rates 3 times last year before pausing in the month of Jan this year. But with rising oil prices threatening to push inflation higher while slowing growth, analysts say the Fed is likely to stay cautious for now. Meanwhile, U.S. markets ended in positive territory on Tuesday, led by gains in airline and travel stocks, including Delta Airlines. The rebound came even as investors remained cautious about elevated oil prices and the ongoing conflict in West Asia. Markets are watching closely for signals on interest rates as policymakers weigh inflation risks from rising energy costs against signs of economic slowdown.
U.S. stocks closed higher on Tuesday, with the Dow ticking up marginally, the S&P 500 adding 0.25%, and the Nasdaq gaining nearly 0.5%. The Federal Reserve began its two-day policy meeting on Tuesday amid investors' worries about high oil prices and the Middle East conflict. Rob Hayworth is Senior Investment Strategy Director at U.S. Bank Asset Management Group.
Really, the market is waiting for the Fed tomorrow. And I think the market's giving us a little credit and a little leeway before the Fed to try and hopefully the Fed can make some sense of how they're thinking about oil and elevated oil prices and the war and what their forward view is. So we're getting a little bit of a bounce, but I'm not sure it's going to last, depending upon what the Fed says tomorrow and what their dot plot tells us, and in particular what Chair Powell says in his press conference.
While traders expect the Fed to keep borrowing costs unchanged now, rate futures suggest expectations of 1 rate cut toward the end of the year, down from around 2 before the war, according to LSEG data. Stocks on the move Tuesday included airline and travel companies, which rebounded from losses in recent weeks related to surging energy prices due to the Middle East conflict. Shares of Delta rose 6.5%, while American Airlines gained 3.5% after both companies raised their revenue guidance for the current quarter. Norwegian Cruise Line and Expedia Group rose more than 2% and 4%, respectively. Energy companies Occidental and ConocoPhillips also gained, tracking higher crude prices. And shares of Uber rallied more than 4% after the ride-hailing app announced plans to roll out robo-taxis in 28 cities starting next year, powered by NVIDIA's autonomous driving software.
The U.S. President has hinted at imminent action on Cuba as the island grapples with major power blackout. Now, speaking hours after a nationwide electricity outage in Cuba, Trump said that the country was in very bad shape. He added that Havana is in talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and suggested Washington could soon take action.
Well, Cuba right now is in very bad shape. They're talking to Marco, and we'll be doing something with Cuba very soon.
Mr. President,
we're really focused on this, but we're dealing with Cuba. Marco, do you want to say a couple of words about it?
Yeah, I mean, Cuba has an economy that doesn't work and a political and governmental system that can't fix it. So they have to change dramatically. What they announced yesterday is not dramatic enough. It's not going to fix it. So they've got some big decisions to make over there.
Meanwhile, U.S. airlines reported better than expected bookings heading into the spring season, boosting fares and revenue outlook. However, the surge in jet fuel prices linked to the Iran war is pushing up operating costs, creating pressure on margins. The industry is balancing strong passenger demand with volatile energy prices as the West Asia conflict continues.
U.S. Airlines on Tuesday reported stronger than expected travel demand heading into the spring, supporting higher fares and revenue growth. This comes even as a surge in jet fuel prices linked to the Iran war has pushed operating costs higher. Executives said carriers were already moving to blunt the impact through fare increases and capacity discipline, betting that resilient consumer and corporate demand would allow the industry to recover at least part of the added expense if elevated fuel prices persist. Shares of most U.S. airlines, including American, United, and Delta, jumped Tuesday morning following the new guidance. Delta's CEO told a conference Tuesday that consumer and corporate demand accelerated into March, prompting the airline to raise its first quarter revenue forecast while maintaining its earnings outlook, though the company later said it was canceling some flights because of delays caused by the partial government shutdown that is leading to very long wait times at TSA security checkpoints. A TSA administrator told Fox News the funding standoff could lead to the shutdown of some smaller airports in the coming weeks. American Airlines also updated investors on Tuesday, saying its first quarter revenue is now expected to rise more than 10%, above its previous forecast of 7 to 10%, as demand outperformed expectations. The carrier said it still expects an adjusted loss per share, but now sees it toward the lower end of its earlier guidance. Jet fuel prices have soared since the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran in late February, lifting costs for an industry where fuel is second only to labor in terms of expenses and typically accounts for about 20 to 25% of total operating costs. U.S. airlines are particularly exposed because most do not hedge fuel costs, unlike some European and Asian carriers that use hedging to cushion price shocks. Still, Scandinavian carrier SAS said Tuesday it will cancel some flights in the short term, citing the sharp and sudden increase in fuel prices. Meanwhile, Delta said the industry already had pushed through 2 fare increases in the past 2 weeks, and it remained well positioned to recover high costs with flexibility to cut capacity if fuel prices stay elevated.
Well, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, David Zaslav, could receive a massive payout following the company's controversial sale to Paramount Skydance. A regulatory filing shows Zaslav is set to receive up to $887 million for the sale. The payout includes stock awards, bonuses, and other compensation tied to the deal.
Warner Brothers Discovery Chief Executive David Zaslav, who has consistently ranked among America's highest-paid CEOs, will now likely receive one of the richest golden parachutes on record. A regulatory filing this week showed that Zaslav is set to pocket up to $887 million after the Warner Brothers sale to Paramount Skydance is completed. Breaking down the numbers, Zaslav is expected to get cash severance of $34.2 million, including salary continuation and bonus components triggered by a change in control termination. The Warner Brothers CEO is also set to receive $517.2 million in unvested share awards, as well as potential tax reimbursements of about $335 million. Warner Brothers Discovery last month agreed to be acquired by Paramount Skydance in a $110 billion deal, ending a high-stakes battle over the storied Hollywood studio against rival bidder Netflix. Along with his golden parachute, Zaslav is going out with Oscar Gold, as Warner Brothers emerged as the biggest winner at Sunday's Academy Awards. The studio's One Battle After Another won 6 Oscars, including for Best Picture, while its film Sinners collected 4.
And the story of carbon capture, utilization and storage technologies is heating up, and that was the central point at the Silver Jubilee edition of TERI's World Sustainability Development Summit recently concluded in New Delhi. Michael Walker, CEO of Stax Engineering, spoke about how newer and more efficient carbon capture technologies are staging different developments across the world. Listen in.
Over time, carbon capture utilization and storage, that is CCUS technologies, have demonstrated their capacity to adequately reduce steelmaking emissions. This is true even for the cement industry. Carbon capture utilization and storage is a crucial climate technology suite that captures CO2 emissions from industrial sources, that is power plants and refineries, or the atmosphere, either storing it underground permanently or utilizing it for products like chemicals, plastics and concrete. It is essential for decarbonizing hard-to-abate sectors.
I think primarily we're in the early innings of carbon capture, in as much as a lot of new technologies have been coming out and they're being tested in the marketplace. And it's a lot of innovation and a lot of competition, which is what we want. That's what we need in order to get these tested and have the ones that are able to provide the best value to the customer win out in the marketplace. Where we are right now is determining what that looks like. And I think a lot of that has to do with where we're putting that carbon once we capture it. So whether we're putting it in a pipeline, whether we're using it for a commodity, whether we're putting it into the ground. So that really determines a big piece of what the carbon capture mechanism itself. Stax Engineering, what we do, and in California has an at-berth regulation, and what that at-berth regulation was designed to do was capture emissions at port. So when a vessel comes in port, a container, an auto carrier, a tanker, it keeps its auxiliary engines running. And when it does that, it emits somewhere around 40 to 50,000 cars worth of emissions a day. And California, after solving its emission in the 70s and 80s and 90s, looked toward the ports to solve those particular problems on the emissions. And so that's targeted PM 2.5 and NOx. And what we say at Stax is those are the things that kill people today. And unfortunately, it's disproportionately in the neighborhoods around the ports. As that fallout comes in, it's increase in cancer rates, increase in emphysema and asthma and heart disease. And so by eliminating that, and it's basically what we do is we put a large bonnet over a stack and we take all those emissions and it processes through our processing unit where we take out the PM and we take out the NOx, and all we release at that point is CO2. Now in California particularly, CO2 is not a regulated gas, and so we're allowed to release it. However, what we've done at Stax is we have actually partnered with several carbon capture companies and put that technology onto our barge as well. And ultimately what happens is we're able to capture the CO2 in addition to the PM and the NOx. And what that means ultimately is any vessel that comes into a port, we can now make a zero emission vessel, which is a pretty powerful statement.
What are the challenges? High costs and the need for long-term storage stability.
Currently, the way the system works is we charge on an hourly basis. And so the advantage that is to the ports and to the customers is they don't have to pay for the CapEx up front. They have a system that shows up when they show up, we attach, and then it's an hourly rate. That's for the auto carriers themselves, their customers are the Mercedes, the Toyotas, the Hyundais of the world, and that fits right into their ESG plan. They are looking for ways to decarbonize and reduce their emissions within their supply chain. So they're ecstatic about that. But if you look at who pays for it, you know, right now, if those emissions are unfiltered and dropped in the community, it's billions of dollars for the state to cover the healthcare effects of those. So they're paying right now is the state. The way it works in our model is that we charge the vessel carriers themselves, it ends up being 100 to 200 rupees a container, maybe 500 rupees a car. So it's really not a significant amount of pass-through compared to the savings that you're getting when you talk about the overall effect from the health perspective.
Now, what are the key aspects of CCUS? 1. Capture methods. This includes post-combustion, that is separating CO2 from fuel gas. And pre-combustion. Pre-combustion removes CO2 from fossil fuels before combustion by converting fuel, that is coal, natural gas and biomass, into a high-pressure synthesis gas of hydrogen and carbon dioxide. 2. Storage. Storage in carbon capture involves injecting captured CO2, often in supercritical fluid state, into deep underground geological formations for permanent sequestration. 3. Utilization. This involves capturing CO2 from industrial sources or the air and converting it into valuable products like synthetic fuels, chemicals, for example urea, methanol, and building materials.
We're fitted in the vessels that's delivering. So the big auto carriers basically are floating parking lots, right? And they're filled with thousands of BMWs. As they come into port and they are waiting to offload all the cars, they ultimately are running their engines continuously, equivalent to 40 to 50,000 cars worth of emissions a day. What we do is we stop that emission there from going in the local community, from going to the local school ground or the playground, and the transfer cost of that is de minimis. It's, as I mentioned, maybe 300 to 500 rupees a car that's passed either through to the consumer or borne by BMW themselves.
CCUS supports reducing emissions from industrial processes, that is steel and cement, and allows for negative emissions via technologies like direct air capture and bioenergy with CCS. While CCUS is essential for high emission industries like mining, cement and steel, just to name a few, the cost stresses margins. And here, the divide between the global north and the global south becomes prominent.
We're still trying to figure out what the pricing looks like for these solutions. And you look at somewhere like the UK that's got a networked pipelines that are former oil and gas pipelines that go out to the North Sea. Well, that's a great delivery system of that carbon when it's captured. So yes, it gets to go out. It's a nice delivery system. I know in California we don't have a delivery system. So if we capture it, what do we do with it? Do we have to transport to landfill? Do we, how do we move it? It becomes expensive. So I would say, I don't know if there's a delta between north and south yet, because I don't think we really know what that cost is for capture. I don't think industry has figured out what the most optimal solution is. I think we're working toward that. And I think there's still a lot of investment going into carbon capture. Despite what it's happening in the US and standards moving, you're still seeing a tremendous amount of investment into carbon capture. And I think that's positive. I think what we really need, ultimately, people will bet on technology. Investors will invest in technology, new technology, risky technology. Investors don't like to invest in risky markets. They want to know what the market is. You could have okay technology with a great market and people will invest in you. If you have great technology in a bad market, you're out of luck. And so I think the more we can get those carbon prices firm that investors can point to and they can build financial models around, the more likely we're going to see adoption of these technologies.
खेलता है झूलता उछलता है दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
Someone to bring your vision into reality. When human vision meets artificial intelligence, storytelling enters new territory. Two distinct categories: brand films, short films, evaluated by the best of the best, seen by those who shape the industry, rewarded with a 10 lakh rupee prize pool, celebrated at What India Thinks Today, Delhi.
AI Squared Awards, where artificial intelligence meets artistic imagination.
What you saw me on the field and off the field is like chalk and cheese.
No guts, no glory, no pain, no gain.
My tendency is to go for magic, not for perfection.
I never give up. I like to win.
Just me being here, it's a statement.
When chips are down, the whole team could have looked up to you, said, Dada is still there.
Every time, whether I scored 100 or a Sachin scored 100 or a Rahul scored 100, the scoreboard said India won.
Let the kids know and the families know that one of the best ways to get a good education, go to a good school and a good college anywhere in the world is if you play a sport well.
There is a quality about me, which is why perhaps people feel I'm a perfectionist, because I don't get tired easily.
In Germany, the biggest newspaper was written on the first page, this is a finishing from Lothar Matthäus' career, and this was motivating me.
I was literally on my phone at home and they're like, oh, we have the results. We suggest that you remove your breasts. And I'm like, wait, what?
This season, we're going to explore the unknown sides and destinations of Spain.
This is India's #1 news network, and you're watching News 9, English news as it should be.
Hello and a very warm welcome. I'm Nancy Bora and you're watching News 9. Headlines first. USS Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier leaves the war with Iran, heads back to port after a fire broke out in its laundry area and left at least 2 sailors with injuries. Iran confirms the death of its national security chief, Ali Larijani, hours after Israel took responsibility of killing him in an airstrike. Iranian President Pezeshkian condones Larijani's death while vowing to take revenge. Iran cluster missile barrages hit central Israel, damages train station and buildings. Iran says attacks on Tel Aviv were revenge for Larijani's killing. US President Donald Trump says military operation in Iran, quote unquote, largely over. Adds, we are not ready to leave Iran yet, but will be leaving in the near future. Donald Trump reacts to NATO members declining to assist in the Iran operation, says it's not good for a partnership when they say what you're doing is a great thing, but we are not going to help.